And to kick off this exciting weekend, I have the distinct pleasure of introducing Professor Richard Lazarus. I've known Professor Lazarus for a decade and a half now, grabbing coffee with him as an environmental law fellow back in the day. And despite his brilliant mind, vast experience, and publications and speeches too numerous to list, what struck me then and still does now is his accessibility. With all the important work to be done, it's often hard to focus on the next generation and their role in the struggle. But despite work that takes them all over the world to exotic locales like Cuba, Galway, Innsbruck, Tehran, and Florence, Professor Lazarus has shown an amazing capacity to stay connected to his students, treating each incoming class as special. While I learned environmental law in a classroom, Professor Lazarus' students followed him to the Supreme Court in Washington, D.C. While my classmates and I read cases about the EPA, his students heard from the head of the EPA a couple weeks ago, actually. And of special note, to my knowledge, he has never turned down an invitation to a NAELS conference. Professor Lazarus served on the National Environmental Justice Advisory Council from 1994 to 97, and again from 2005 to 2006. He's represented the United States, state and local governments, and environmental groups in the Supreme Court in 40 cases, presenting oral arguments in 13 of those. And after a long and impressive stint at Georgetown, he came to Harvard and now serves as the Howard J. and Catherine W. Abel Professor of Law. Will you all please join me in welcoming Professor Richard Lazarus.
Well, I want to welcome everyone to Harvard Law School and to the annual meeting of the National Association of Environmental Law Societies. Both have been around for a long time. Harvard Law School, almost 200 years, about 197 to be exact. The NAELS, this is their 26th year. This is the first time the program has ever been at Harvard Law School. Things can move slowly sometimes here at Harvard Law School. 26 years is a long time to wait. It's older than most of the students in the room. The good news is, though, what a program they put together. The theme of the program is of compelling significance, environmental justice. Modern environmental law challenged the nation in the 1970s to do no less than redefine the relationship of humankind to the natural environment, and led to the enactment of a series of radically redistributive and forward-looking laws. And then in the 1990s, environmental justice did the same to environmental law. It challenged environmental law to do no less than redefine its, environmental law's relationship to humankind, and to account for the needs, the environmental justice needs, of low-income communities and communities of color across the nation and indeed around the globe. Environmental justice has challenged the way we think about, fashion, and practice environmental law. To assess the state of environmental justice today and to discuss the future and the opportunities and challenges in the future, we have an extraordinary array of speakers and panelists. They include, as we'll see, the environmental justice movement's inspirational leaders, its path-breaking scholars, its tacticians, community leaders and strategists literally from around the nation. In addition to a terrific series of panels, the conference will be punctuated by a few discrete events. The opening keynote by Dr. Robert Bullard, who I will introduce in just a moment. A moment of remembrance and celebration of Luke Cole, Harvard Law School class of 1989, activist lawyer, community organizer, scholar, and teacher. Luke tragically died in a car accident in Uganda in 2009. Luke is a role model for what one can do as an environmental lawyer, the difference that one person can make. This evening, we'll have the presentation of the law school's most prestigious award in environmental law, the Horizon Award, will go to former EPA Administrator Lisa Jackson, who more than any other administrator of EPA made environmental justice a priority at that agency. And tomorrow we'll be joined by Gerald Torres, Professor of Law, University of Texas, former Special Counsel to the U.S. Attorney General Janet Reno, who drafted the Environmental Justice Executive Order that's having its 20th anniversary today, or this month. One of the nation's most important environmental law scholars in the country, who has served as a bridge between environmental law and civil rights law. But I'm here to welcome, but I don't want you to be misled. I and my colleagues are at best eye candy for this event. This is a student-inspired event from soup to nuts. They made the bid to host. They developed and came up with the environmental justice theme. We didn't. They organized and planned the entire program. They told me what to do the welcome. And it's to those students that we on the faculty are extraordinarily grateful. Now, my immediate assignment, though, that they gave me was introduce the topic by the way of introducing Dr. Robert Bullard. And that's easy to do because I was myself introduced to both simultaneously. I had never heard of environmental justice before August 1990. Not that it didn't exist before August 1990, only that I had not heard of it, or at least I thought I had never heard of it. It had never sunk in. My professional life before then had been all things environmental law, from my freshman year in college on. Everything in college I did, everything in law school that I did, everything after law school I did, first at the Department of Justice and then as a legal academic. Yet I had missed it. And that by itself underscored how significant the problem was. All those like me were missing it. Environmental legal academics around the country, government environmental lawyers, the environmental lawyers of the nation's leading environmental groups were all missing it. We all missed it, though, because we didn't want to hear it. We did not want to hear that environmental protection law, which we believed was only progressive, was in fact disproportionately harming the poor and racial minorities. Not just failing to address their needs, but in some places actually making things worse for those communities. How could that be? The environmental movement, after all, grew out of the civil rights movement. Many of the same people became involved in both. The environmental movement was inspired by the civil rights movement. The Environmental Defense Fund, the Sierra Club Legal Defense Fund, the Natural Resource Defense Council. No coincidence. They were all model inspired after the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. They took Thurgood Marshall's playbook and they tried to apply it to environmental law. So we didn't want to believe it, but it was true. And here is how I found out. I actually remember the precise moment. Friday, August 31st, 1990, 3 p.m. I had just finished my hazardous waste class, the first week of class at Washington University in St. Louis. And after class was over, a student approached me about an independent research topic he wanted to work on. His name was Kevin Brown. Kevin was the only African-American student in that class. And he said he wanted to do a paper on whether hazardous waste sites were disproportionately located in black communities. I was stunned. No one had ever mentioned that possibility to me before. I had worked on cases, at that point for a decade. I had worked on Superfund cases. I'd been involved in hazardous waste litigation. It never dawned on me as a possibility. I said, of course, absolutely. What an interesting topic. 2 weeks later, I ran to Kevin on a Saturday morning at the law school. And I said, Kevin, how's the research going? He said, I found nothing. I've looked everywhere and I found absolutely nothing. And I said, where have you been looking? He said, the law library. I said, Kevin, it was in the law library, I would know about it. Go to the main library on campus. 1 week later, he showed up in my office. He had a huge pile of books and articles. Nothing by law professors, 0. Nothing by law students, 0. By sociologists, by Dr. Robert Bullard. Dr. Robert Bullard was the path-breaking scholar on environmental justice, beginning with his study of the siting of garbage dumps in Houston in the early 1980s in support of litigation, actually originally I think brought them by his wife, culminating in a nationwide study in a book published in 1990, Dumping in Dixie. More than any other scholar, Dr. Robert Bullard raised the nation's consciousness to environmental justice. And Dr. Bullard did not stop at scholarship. He translated his scholarship into action and to advocacy. It was Dr. Bullard's, along with others, meetings with EPA Administrator Bill Riley in 1990, which led to the creation of first the Office of Environmental Equity at EPA, and then later the Office of Environmental Justice at EPA. It was Dr. Bullard who organized the first National People of Color Environmental Leadership Summit in DC in October 1991. It was Dr. Bullard whose advocacy led to President Bill Clinton signing that first executive order for environmental justice in 1994. It was Dr. Bullard whose advocacy led to the creation of EPA's first National Environmental Justice Advisory Council in 1994, which has served as a steward for that executive order for more than 20 years. I had the privilege of being woken up by Dr. Bullard's scholarship in 1990. I had the privilege of attending the first National People of Color Environmental Leadership Summit in Washington, D.C. in October 1991 as an academic observer. And I had the privilege of serving with Dr. Bullard on EPA's first National Environmental Justice Advisory Council in 1994. And today, I have the privilege, indeed the honor, of introducing Dr. Bullard as our lead-off keynote speaker here at Harvard Law School. Born in Elba, Alabama, a graduate of Alabama A&M University, with a master's and PhD in sociology from Atlanta University and Iowa State University, and a former U.S. Marine. Dr. Bullard has served on the faculties of Texas Southern, University of Tennessee, University of California, Riverside, and Clark Atlanta University. And since 2011, he has been Dean of the Barbara Jordan Mickey Leland School of Public Affairs at Texas Southern University. Dr. Robert Bullard.